videos. In our first class for VPSC 131, Perspective on Public Administration, we had studied Block 1, in which we had gone through concept and significance in public administration. This block had covered scientific management approach, administrative management approach, and bureaucratic approach. We had gone through all these approaches in a detailed manner. I will go through just for the revision pattern. In scientific management approach, which was introduced by W.F. Taylor, in his scientific management theory, he believed that in order to improve the functioning of the organization, scientific principles needed to be applied, like training in a set procedure. Training focused on optimum physical psychological conditions of workers to gain maximum output. That was the scientific management approach introduced by the Taylor. Next was we had gone through was administrative management approach. The main element of the scholar's objective was management oriented logical positivism made in administrative management. The scholars believed that efficiency was a neutral force necessary for the improvement of organization. In the administrative management approach, basically the scholars stress their views on the management of the organizations. Next, we had gone through the bureaucratic approach. Bureaucratic approach was foremost was the Max Weber was the foremost thinker of modern bureaucracy, but J.S. Mill, G.W.S. Hegel, etc., more of the scholars were also there who comprehensively discussed on bureaucratic and bureaucracy implies on the direct work of the government. Bureaucracy on their point of view implies direct work of government and sometimes refer to bureaucrats as the actual governor who actually govern the government. Weber identified two types of domains in the bureaucratic approach was namely the tradition and the charismatic approach. So this was the bureaucratic approach that was gone through by the scholars. We had already studied these three approaches. Now we will further move on to the next block, that is the second block, that is behavioral system and social psychological perspectives. In this block, mostly the human relation approach we have gone through. Unit 5 that is going, that we would now study and will continue with that block. Human relation approach, this is the third approach in the subject of perspective of public administration. First, we had studied the scientific approach, second, the administrative approach, third, the bureaucratic approach. Now we are going through the human relation approach. Now, human relation theory, once an outcome of the human relation movements, refer to the study made to understand and or analyze the effect of social relations, motivations, and employee satisfaction on industrial productivity. Therefore, the human relation theory is in contrast to the classical theory that laid emphasis on the structural aspects of the organization. It brings to fore the fact that psychological or mechanical variables at workplace do not contribute to increased productivity. So, underlying understanding the human psychology, it is very essential, which has been by the human relation approach. In the human relation approach, basically, we study the human psychology, what psychology is needed for the betterment of the production in the workplace. Considering that the primary of the organization is to be attributed to natural human grouping, communication, and leaderships. For these human relation approach, many experiments were done. The early experiment was done by Mayo. On the basis of his studies, conducted in Milo came to the conclusion that physical fatigue was the key motivating factor for the workers that led contributed to the decrease in the industrial productivity. He experimented with giving test period of 10 minutes each, twice a day in the morning and evening, to each term of workers. This had a remarkable impact on the workers. The scheme found favor with the workers and led to gradual decline in the labor turnover. The experiment was done on the laborers or the workers working in an organization in the lower class. The turning point in the development of human relation approach came with the well-known experiment conducted at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electrical Company. The major achievement of the human relation approach, the experiment was done in a plant. It was there in the electrical company near Chicago in the US between 1924 and 1932. This experiment was done. The major objective was to establish the relationship between workplace, lightning, and individual efficiency. So, what better we can get from the worker and how we can get the productivity more efficient and more productive. Therefore, the human relation studies during these periods, the human relation could be divided during the period of 3 years from 1924 to 1927. A series of illumination level studies were conducted by the industrial engineers of Western Electrical Company work in Chicago. So this is the in this company only many of the experiments were taken. Few of the experiments were conducted for the studies of human relation. Like great illumination in the first experiment. The first experiment which was taken was the experiment was conducted by the researchers on three different departments, irrespective of increasing or decreasing level of illumination. There had been increase in productivity. The researchers experimented with the decreased lighting on the same group. The control group received stable illumination, while the other experimental group got decreasing level of illumination. The basic experiment which was conducted was to see how the productivity could be increased. So, when the illumination was given in the increasing order, the illumination decreases the productivity, and when it was decreased, the lightning, the productivity increased. This was the experimental result of this experiment. They increased production, but finally, when the experimental group got very low illumination, they protested and production decreases. No conclusive relationship could be established between illumination levels, incentives, schemes, and productivity levels. No, this experiment didn't give them any of the conclusions. It could be have been due to interest shown by the research team in the workers or relation of incentive wages plan. But maybe the wages what they were offering were less, and the workplace was not more motivating, or the workers the time was more. That is why this research did not succeed. Mayo and his team, based on the observation, further developed a series of other experiments investigating the factor of workers' productivity. So, when this experiment didn't work, they experimented many other things in it. First was the relay assembly experiment. The then the second experiment which they did was the relay assembly experiment. This experiment was conducted to examine the impact of other variable unproductivity. So why this unproductivity was going through? So the researchers measured the impact of different variables such as payments, breaks, refreshments, and shortening the work duration on the group and individual productivity in general. It was observed that changing a variable increased productivity. Means if we increase the payment, the productivity increases. If we give the better environment for work, the productivity increases. Refreshment and shortening the work duration increased the productivity. The researchers formed the conclusion that there were certain significant factors impacting the productivity. This included extra attention given to the workers, having sympathetic supervision. Now, what the worker needed for to increase the productivity was the sympathetic supervision, giving the better place to work and apparent interest shown towards the superior by the management. These researchers hypothesized that choosing one's co-worker, also working as a group, being treated as special and having sympathetic supervision, what the actual reason for increase in the productivity. What in the relay assembly experiment, what they found out that giving the worker a very secure mm, environment for working, the productivity increases. If the superiors or the managers or the management gives them a sympathetic supervision, the productivity increases. Also, if the workers are given the choice of working with their co-workers or the group they have formed, then also the productivity increases. This was the relay assembly experiment. Next experiment was the interviewing program. Interviewing was another significant phase of the Hawthorne experiment. This was done with the basic objective of studying the human attitudes and sentiments. First relay assembly experiments was to give the worker a better place to work. Then the intervene program experiment was to see that if the worker has a sentiment towards the workplace or the organization, the human attitudes, if we say, the productivity of the work is far more better. And second, if the relationship of the productivity, the approach to the interviews was quite friendly and sympathetic. It was also impartial and non judgmental. This experiment was significant in the following aspects. This experiment gave the points that the workers being treated as par with the management. If the workers are treated in par with the management in soliciting their views about the problems of the company. If the problems are discussed by the worker, means the higher authorities, if they discuss their problems in a round table conference, or if they get together and discuss the problem of the company, then the better results could be gained. Their significance given to human attitude and sentiments as they play an important role in work situation. Now, the change in the attitude of the supervisor too, as their feelings were being observed by the researcher team, and the significance of informal social forces at work. Now, these social forces, if they are absent in the workplace, then the result would be better, which makes an organization not just an economic and technological structure, but also an intricate web of human relation bound together by a system of sentiments. If the sentiments are involved in among the workers for the organization, then the uh, productivity or the works or whatever the result is very alarming. Now, the next experiment was the bank wiring observation room. This was the last study taken by Mayo and his team in Western Electrical Company to observe a group of 14 people performing a task in a bank wiring room. It was observed that they formed their own informal organization with some group of clients, and with natural leaders emerging with the concern of the members. In this experiment, wages were given on the basis of a group incentive plans. No, in this experiment, not one person was given the incentive, whole group was given the incentive plans, and each member got his share on the basis of total output of the group. Elton Mayo, on the basis of these Hawthorne experiments, had an opinion that workers had been unable to find suitable outlet for expressing their personal problems and dissatisfaction in the work life. Now, what the other effects of this observation were that if working in a group also gave a drawback also, that it was that the worker was not able to express their personal problems and dissatisfaction in the work life. Mayo's experiments brought out that informal approaches and groups with this in human emotions, sentiments, and interaction play a very important role. Therefore, the management should strive to establish equilibrium between the technical and human organizations and develop skills in handling human relations and situations. Therefore, in bank wiring observation group, the result was that we should establish an equilibrium relationship, means the management and the worker class. These equilibrium should be maintained for technical and human organization for developing skills in handling human relations and situations. Now, what the why these experiments, whatever the experiment we had taken, the relay assembly experiment, the interviewing problem, the bank wiring observation room is significant in the Heathrow Electrical Company. The significance of this studies was the human relation approach, which grew out of the Heathrow experiment, emphasized the emotional aspects in the human behavior. Now, what significant was that it gave the emphasis on human relation, that we should also cater the human relation aspects of human behavior. Research conducted had shown the impact of groups on the behavior of individuals at work. These studies brought out that work satisfaction depended to a large extent on the informal social pattern of the work group. Therefore, people work performance he conducted are dependent on both social issues and job content. Therefore, by these experiments, what the studies brought was the work satisfaction could only be gained to a large extent when the informal social pattern of the work group is not there. People's work performance is conducted in a dependent, not in a dependent manner, both social. If they are dependent on both social issues and job content, the production or the organizational work is to be satisfied. And then Mayo later, after a period of reflection, concluded that job satisfaction increased as workers were given more freedom to determine the condition of their working environment. Now, what by these experiment and seeing the significance of the experiment, the Mayo concluded that job satisfaction is needed in every worker, and this job satisfaction could only be gained by giving them freedom to determine the condition of their working environment and to set their own standards of output. Intensified interaction and cooperation created a high level of group cohesion. Meaning, job satisfaction and output depended more on cooperative and a feeling of worth than on physical working conditions. Means the worker are appreciated and they are involved in the management committee. Though this gave them the job satisfaction, and which in case these output, the standard output of the production was raised. The most important discovery of the Heathrow experiment had been the strong need amongst the workers to cooperate and communicate with. The most important discovery of Hartway experiment has been the strong need among the workers to cooperate and communicate with the following workers. The basic tenet of human relation theory emanating from Mayo's work that individual worker cannot be treated in isolation. Since every worker should be there, the individual worker cannot be treated in isolation. That means no worker can work in isolation. Since they are basically social beings, they should be seen and understood as members of a group. Informal groups formed at work have a strong influence on the behavior of workers in the group. Productivity to a large extent influenced by social and psychological factors rather than by physical work conditions. Productivity to a large extent was influenced by the psychological factors and the physical work conditions given to the workers. Ambitions within the organization exercise strong social control over the work habits and attitudes of the individual workers and managers, and the manager must be aware of the social needs and cater to them in order to ensure that employees collaborate with the official organization rather than work against it. Now, the basic ambition of the organization was to make or create a strong social control over the work habits and attitudes of the individual workers. A good manager, therefore, a good manager is one who is able to blend technical expertise with social capabilities. The experiment showed that complex interactional variables such as attention paid to the workers as individuals, workers' control over their own work, and differences between individuals' need, management's willingness to listen, group norms, and direct feedback play an important role in motivating people in organization. The base to motivate people working in an organization, the experiment uh, showed that interactional variables such as like the manager and the workers, the clerk, and the lower working people should have an interaction between each other. Like, secondly, the variables such as attention the paid to the workers as the individual, like the every individual's salary, payment, wages, time limits, how much he had worked, how much he had given his work to the organization. All these things should be have an interaction between the manager and the worker. The second was the workers' control over their own work. Every worker should have a freedom of working in his own workplace. Then differences between individual needs, management, willingness to listen. Now the management society should listen to the willingness of the individual. Group norms and direct feedback play an important role in motivating people in the organization. Whatever the feedback, whatever the policies or the programs or the roles or the rules which are labeled by the organization, and when the workers are, when these rules are came into the effect, what feedback they get from the workers, that plays an important role to motivate people in the organization for the better output. Now, the human relation approach uh, in the has critics also. Many had by many have also criticized the human relation approach that was experimented by Mayo. The Hathrow studies, the most acclaimed management research, which formed the basis of human relation theories, have been subjected to criticism by several scholars. These related to the following aspects. Several scholars have identified some of its methodological limitations, such as theoretical constraints, next, situational bias and productivity of the evidence regarding workers, home life, etc. The background of the workers from where they had come was not included in the research or the experiments taken by the um, team of Mayo. Hathaway studies did not take recognition of the impact of technological practices enhancing the productivity. Only the human and the worker and the management committee was the foremost aim of the experiment. The technological practices was not given any importance. The emphasis was more on group discussion making and did not give importance to individual decision making. The more was on the group decisions and not on individual decision making. Human motivation is multidimensional, and human relation theorists in it said could not be explored this phenomena in totality. Therefore, the Marxist considers Mayo methodology's technique to exploit workers because they did not lay emphasis on the normic factors in organizations. Contemporary scholars noted that economic benefits perhaps motivated the hard-through workers more than the social benefits. According to other critics, workers did not care about money because the workers whom Mayo studied functioned like calculating machines to determining the output and daily pay. Means the Mayo, the on which the Mayo had taken the experiment, they were the daily wages workers. Human relation approach has been challenged and extended later by scholars by classifying different groups' behavior into different types. The critics found that group cohesion and behavior depended on technology and work organization rather than by management abilities. The- They categorized group behavior into four categories. That was the apathetic, second was erratic, third strategic, and conservative. These four groups were there for the management abilities. Human relation approach propagated by Mayo paved the way for generation of new ideas or group relationship and leadership styles. These subsequently theorists such as Ibrahim Maslow, Frederick McGod's examined the factors affecting the motivation of individuals working in organization. This is considered as neo-relation. The means after whatever the experiments or the research or the work was done on human relation the, on the working organization, this concept was called the neo relation. Mayo's Hubble's hypothesis, which considered individuals as surprising only self-interest, the Mayo only considered individually. He studied only the um, individuals, workers' attitudes and the whatever the need of the worker, and the self-interest only was picked up for further expansions. Now, his hypothesis on the self-interest of the worker and or the individual's workplace, which was experimented by Mayer, was further had an expansion as theory X and theory Why by Douglas McGeorge. He made certain assumptions about people and work which had wider implications for leadership and management. Further, this XY theory was further made for the interest of the workers and the working class of the uh, organization or the managerial work organization in the human relation approach. Now, the second approach, not the second approach. Now, if we go through further, if we move, now we will go through the decision making approach. First was the in this um, subject of perspective on public administration. First, I'm repeating the approaches what we had gone through. Was the first we had gone through the scientific management approach. Next, we had gone to administrative management approach. Third was the bureaucratic approach. Fourth was the human approach, human relation approach. And now we are going through the decision making approach. Now, decision making is considered as an important process in any organization. The nature of an organization is determined by the kinds of decision taken in it. In this applies to the government organization as well. But decision making goes with the private organizations or industries or and government organizations as well. Thus, in the discipline of public administration, to discuss decision making approach is of great relevance as this approach provides useful interference that can facilitate administrative or policy decision. So decision making approach is very relevant for the government organizations, and also it is the discipline of public administration. Now, decision making is thus about the process of arriving at an optimal solution by exploring various alternative choices. This scholars in management and public administration have been involved in various aspects of decision making, and they have made their respective contributions to the approach of decision making. Now we will discuss the what do we mean by decision making approach. The meaning of decision making approach. The different scholars have defined the term decision making in different ways. In general, decision making is not an end part of any activity, but it is means of achieving organizational goals. Chester Bernard is the pioneer in decision making approach. He is the pioneer means he is the one who started this decision making approach. Christian Bernard is the pioneer of in decision making approach and is considered decision making as an essential process of organization actions. Another scholar was there. Herbert Simon is an important scholar in the field of decision making, and he regards decision making approach as an alternative to the classical principle approaches. He further argues that decision making is the core of administrative actions and views organization as a structure of decision makers. The approach of decision making gained popularity during the 1940s, and it deals with the process of choice which lead to action decision making in the government, rural activities, whatever many activities that was done by the government. One individual may pronounce the decision, but many contributed to the process of reaching the decision. The need for taking decision arises when there are several alternatives or course of actions open to an individual. But one has to choose only one alternative through the process of elimination. Now, decision making, the need for decision making is comes only when when the individual or when any of the organization have many other alternatives or the substitute for actions. So decision making is needed to choose only one alternative through the process of elimination. From the various definitions, we can understand that essence of decision making is arriving at a solution from various alternatives irrespective of whether a decision is made in an organization or in an administrative unit or in a governmental setup or even policy making. Thus, the nature of decision making is a dynamic one which has the potential to change the environment of the organization. Now, there are many types of decision making. The scholars have classified the decisions into various types. First one is the programmed or non-programmed decisions. Now, programmed decisions, that it was Herbert Simon in 1997 has made this distinction between programmed and non-programmed decision. He expresses that decisions are programmed to the extent that they are repetitive and routine, to the extent that a definite procedure has worked out for handling them so that they do not have to be treated from scattered each time they occur. So, in the programmed decisions, the repetitive routine is there and the standard procedure is developed in the programmed decisions. And in non-programmed decision, no, it is non-routine, like computer assistance, decision-making operations, system analysis, and structured program all comes under the non-programmed decision. Now, decision making techniques were there for one was traditional and other was the modern. In programmed traditional decision making techniques was implementing by the habits, whatever the like a person is when a person is in a habit of doing a particular work in the same process, so he will do his process in a routine way. So the traditional was the implementing by habit. Now, second was then the adapting standard operating procedure routine to be carried out by the office people. Now, the office people, same routine was there at the particular time they will come, particular work what they have been assigned was done by the official people. So, that was the routine and repetitive work which they do every day whenever they are there in the organization. That is the traditional decision making technique. Next one in traditional way embedded in the organization structure in the form of sub goals, well defined information and channels. This was the traditional decision making technique in a programmed decision. And in programmed decision, modern way in the modern period, operation research developing mathematical models, computer stimulation, etc., electronic data processing, all these techniques are there in the modern form. Now, the first type of decision, programmed decision, traditional is the adapting the standard operating procedure, and in modern operation is the operation research developing techniques are used. Next, other one is the non-program, which is non-routine. In this, the traditional technique was the judgment, intuition, and creativity. Thumb rule of thumb, selection and training of executives. All this traditional form of non-programmed technique was there. And in non-programmed, modern way was the training decision makers in holistic problem solving techniques, developing holistic computer programs. All this comes into the non-programmed modern techniques. So the first one, the programmed and non-programmed decision. Two phases were there, traditional and modern. Second type is the organizational and personal decisions. Christian Bernard 1966 has classified the decisions into two types, organizational and personal decision. He has argued that personal decisions cannot ordinarily be relegated to other organizations. Decisions are made to achieve the organizational objectives, which can be delegated to level from top to bottom. Now, that is the organizational decision, which goes from top to the bottom. Every decision goes from one to the another level in the top level, and each decision has to be obeyed by the other level or the second level which goes up. And personal decision, while the personal decisions are taken by an individual for him or her, which cannot affect the organization directly or indirectly. Organizational decision affect the organization and it goes from top to the bottom, while individual decision does not affect the organization directly or indirectly. Third type of decision was generic and unique decision. The classification of generic and unique decision was enumerated by Peter Douglas in his article The Effective Decision 1967. Generic decisions are like programmed decisions in which reflections are made on the past situation and their decision that was taken in the past gets repeated. Likewise, unique decisions are related to non-programmed decisions in which new decisions are taken to resolve individuals because they are unprecedented. Now, the unique decision we can go through the are related to the non-programmed decisions, and generic decisions are related to the programmed decisions. Just like same like the programmed are the generic and programmed like non-programmed decision are like the unique decision. Another type was routine and strategic decisions. Routine and strategic decisions can also be related to the programmed and non-programmed or generic or unique. They mean the combination of non-programmed, programmed, non-programmed, generic and unique decisions irrespectively. Routine decisions are generally taken for day to day operations of the organization, and the routine decisions are made based on the pre established rules, procedures, and policies of an organization. That is the routine decision. Such decisions are not dynamic in nature and it cannot affect the organization. On the other hand, strategic decisions are critical for organizations, such as decisions mostly deal with the organizational objectives, goals, budget, and imperative policy matters. The nature of the decision is non-routine and non-repetitive, and it can be made through as analysis of various alternatives. Since the decision of this nature can have a direct impact on the substance of the organization, such decisions are taken only by the top level management only. These strategic decisions we are talking about. So these decisions are not repetitive only once the decision has been taken, only once the policy has been taken and it has come to the effect, no other changes or amendment could be done, and if there is any need of amendment then it goes through a proper channeled protocol, and only these strategic decisions are only taken by the top level management only. were the four types of decisions. One was programmed and non-programmed. Second was the organizational and personal decision. Second, generic and unique decision. Fourth was unique, routine, and strategic decision. These were the four types of decisions. Fifth decision is the policy and operating decisions. The kind of classification is policy and operating decision, and in this category of decision can again be related to the strategic and unique decision. Policy decisions are directly related to the policy matter of the organization, and such decisions are made by top level management that we have already said. The strategic management, this decision will have the effect on the whole structure of the organization. On the other hand, operating decisions are routine decisions of the organization which are taken to implement the policy matters of the organization. The decision of this kind is taken by people at the lower level of the management, and such decisions are called a tactical decision. One, like in the other, we have said routine and strategic decision. We have said that routine is the day-to-day decision. Strategic is only once we have come to a decision, it cannot be changed, and these decisions are taken by only the top level management. Same goes with the policy and operating decision. Policy decisions are also related to the strategic decision only. Only top level management uh, has the right to take any kind of a decision for an organization, while the operating decisions are taken by the people at the lower level of the management, and these decisions are called the tactical decisions. These were the five types of decision. Now, this decision, how a decision is made, what is the process of making a decision? A decision making process. There are various steps that are involved in the decision making process, which are logic and systematic. The steps involved in a decision making process include defining the problem, finding alternatives, selecting the alternatives, and getting feedback and finalizing one alternative. This is the process. First, the logical systematic steps are involved. First is the we find the problem. What is the problem for which we have to find the solution. First, we find the problem, define the problem. Then the alternatives. We search for the alternatives to solve the problem. Then selecting the alternatives. Third, and then when we select the alternative, then we get the feedback, and lastly we finalize and come to a conclusion of one alternative. Terry in 1956 has formulated the key steps in decision making process, which include one is to determine the problem acquired, and second was the general background information and viewpoints about the problem. Then state what appears to be the best course of action. What best we can do to solve the problem. Then that level comes. Fourth is the investigation. Investigate the proposition and tentative decisions. We investigate about the problem and propagate the problem, and then come to a tentative decision, which is not finalized at this stage. Then we evaluate the tentative decisions. Next, sixth, we gave making the decision and put it to effect. Whatever decision we have taken, then we put it into action or to effect. And then the last seventh one, the seventh step is the institute follow-up and, if necessary, modify decisions in the light of results oriented. Now, when we have put the decision into effect, we modify it if to gain the better results and to obtain the better output of the decision. So these are the seven steps which are included in the process of decision making. Therefore, if we repeat decision making process, the steps are: first, we determine the problem acquired. Second is the we get a general background of information about the problem. Third, we state what appears to be the best course of action. We adopt that. Fourth is the investigating and propagating the problem and then coming to a tentative decision. Fifth is the decision, the tentative decision in which we have come. The fifth is the step is to evaluate the tentative decision. Sixth is making the decision and put it into effect or action. And seventh is whatever the decision we have taken, and after its effect, what are the necessary what are the necessary modification we can do so that the result that is obtained is better and it gives the light to the problem. These were the decision making process, seven steps. Simon and March in 1960 assert that there are four set of activities which are important for a decision-making process, which includes one was intelligence activity, second was design activity, third is choice activity, fourth is evaluating activity. These four are the important activities which are needed for decision making process. Now, in intelligence activity, which is the initial phase of the decision making process, and it brings with the identification of problem to be solved. It is finding occasion calling for an action. That is the intelligence activity. Second activity is design activity. Now, design activity is to identify the problem, developing and analyzing possible courses of actions. That is the design activity. Third is choice activity. Now, in choice activity is selecting particular course of action from those variables. That is choice activity. Fourth is evaluating activity. Evaluating activity is evaluating past choices to compare programmed and non-programmed decision making in the organization. While the first three processes in decision making were stipulated by the fourth process, namely evaluating activity, was added later in the collaborative work of James G. March and Simon. First, in the decision making process, only three activities were involved. Later, by the process, fourth activity was included, that was the evaluating activity. This was included by the collaborative work of James G. March and Simon. On the whole, it can be summed up that this decision making process in itself is a complex exercise, and as asserted by Simon, it involves technical and political determinants in the process of decision making. Each stage is important in arriving at a final decision. Therefore, this is the decision making process, or we can say the decision making approach. Now, if we go through, if we again, I'm repeating it again and again so that we we are revised by the approaches, what we have done. Now, in this session, we have covered, and the previous session also, we have covered four, five, uh, five approaches. That is, first one we have done is the scientific management approach. I'm repeating it again and again so that it registers there, because we will go through many more other approaches. So, what we have done in this unit is the human relation approach and decision making approach. Now, in the first block we had covered was a scientific management approach, administrative approach, bureaucratic approach. These three we have covered in the first block. Second, we have covered the human relation approach and decision making approach. These are the five approaches we have gone through. And there were another models of decision making. The various models in decision making, almost all the models highlight the importance of rationality in individual or organization that is involved in making a decision. Some of the important models of decision making aspects forwarded by key scholars were there, like Simons had made Simon's bounded rationality model, Lindbergh's incremental model, Zeno's mixed scanning model. These three were Doro's optimal models. These were the four models that was that was done by the scholars. The Simon bounded rationality model had four uh, types, which we said with Simon's work on administrative behavior in 1997. In this seminal work in the field of decision making, we believe that rationality model in decision making is non-realistic and its principles and non-attainable. According to him, rationality is concerned with the selection of preferred behavior alternative in terms of some system of values, whereby the consequences of behavior can be evaluated. This required that firstly the decision maker should have knowledge about all variables, alternatives. Secondly, the decision making should also be able to anticipate the consequences of each of the alternatives. He has classified rationality into various types in which the decisions should be objectively, subjectively, consciously, deliberately. Means Simon's bounded rationality model, four rationals should be there. It should be objective, subjective, conscious, and deliberate. In objectively, it is rational means it is correct behavior for maximizing given value in a given situation. Subjectively rational means the decision maximizes attainment relative to knowledge of the subject. And consciously rational means adjustment of needs to end is a conscious process. Deliberately rational it just means the means to ends has been deliberately brought about. Now, the models of decision making, what I had said, are the four. Um, there are four models: Simon's bounded rationality model, Linden's incremental model, uh, Zeno's mixed scanning model, and Doro's optimal models. These are the four models uh, in decision making. These models we will go through in our next class. What we have covered in in, in the present class is the human relation approach and decision making approach. In decision making approach, we had gone through all these aspects of types of decisions. and these types of decisions and decision making, what are the approaches, what are who are the scholars involved in making, and the experiments that was done. So we have gone through in our next class we will go through the models of decision making. To sum up the class, we will revise the points, but what we have discussed, that are the approaches. Approach this basic BPSC 131 in public administration, that is the perspective on public administration. This subject, in this subject, we studies the various approaches. Now we have covered, I am repeatedly again and again saying that we have covered a scientific management approach, administrative management approach, bureaucratic approach, human relation approach, and decision making approach. In the next class, we will continue with the models of decision making.